On this channel, we love to talk about Game of Thrones, and guess what? We're talking about it again. If you're new here, then you may not know, but I just finished season 1 of Game of Thrones, the TV show. I know, I'm late. I'm already aware, I'm very late to the party. What took me so long? Well, I'll tell you, reading the books first. That's what took me so long. I read the full series of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin before watching the Game of Thrones TV show. Now, because of that, I think I've been viewing the TV show from a different perspective to people who haven't read the books beforehand. So that's what's inspired me to make this video. Let's talk about whether or not the book has changed my perspective of the TV show and if things were better or worse because of it. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this too. Let's get cracking. If you didn't already know, I am doing reactions to each episode of Game of Thrones on my YouTube channel. I'm just about to start season 2. Season 2 episode 1 reaction will be coming probably next week, whenever I decide to upload it. But if you want to see some of my previous reactions or Game of Thrones content, I will leave that in the description box, or you can find it on my channel. I feel like I'm saying words really weirdly today. It's almost like I've forgotten how to speak. I am sick, both physically and mentally. Disclaimer time, there will be spoilers in this video for both the books and season 1 of Game of Thrones. I have not watched season 2, so I cannot spoil it for you yet. If you haven't watched season 1, which I think is unlikely because everybody has, let's be honest, then I'm warning you here, there will be spoilers. I will ruin everything for you. Also, this video is specific to season 1, but I will do an updated version after season 2. Because I think my thoughts and feelings will change, because I have heard that as the series progresses, it's not as consistent with the books anymore. Whereas season 1 was basically a picture-perfect adaptation of book 1. But I've heard that's not the same for future seasons. So this version of this video for season 2 may be different. And I'm excited to see what that video will entail. I hope you are too. Let's start off with the main question people have asked me. Did knowing what was going to happen make it less powerful or impactful or emotive for me? Short answer, no. If anything, it made it worse because I knew what was coming up. A prime example of that, Ned Stark's death. I spent that whole episode being highly anxious and scared and fearful because I knew what was going to happen. If I didn't know that he was going to die, I could have lived peacefully whilst I was watching that episode. So although I didn't get the shock factor, I just spent the whole of episode 9 being highly anxious because I could sense it was coming. I did film my reaction to that and I did cry. That's the thing, is that I knew it wasn't going to be a happy ending, whereas if I had not read the books first, I may have thought that there could be a happy ending for at least one character. But let's be honest, in A Song of Ice and Fire, there just isn't. I mean, nobody has an ending yet. The series is unfinished. So watching season 1 meant that I knew good things were not going to happen for Ned Stark. And I was just anticipating that for the whole episode, and it was so hard to watch. Similarly, I'm having that same experience now, but with Sansa. So I know that in season 2, Sansa is going to have a lot of really hard stuff going on. That girl experiences a lot of trauma. And we got just the tiniest start of it in season 1. Having read the books, I know how much worse things are going to get for her, and I'm just scared for it. Anywho, my main point that I was trying to get to, I didn't get the shock factor of Ned Stark's death, but I did get the emotion, the trauma, the anxiety, the anticipation, the stress for the whole episode in the build up to it, because I knew it was coming up. So which one is worse? You tell me. One thing that I think is better if you haven't read the books when going into the TV show is Joffrey's character development. So at the start of season 1, he looks really innocent. He just looks like a sweet young boy. Whereas I've read the books first, so I know how evil and cruel and just generally horrific this dude is. But you don't realise how horrific he is until he demands Ned Stark's head to be chopped off. So if you hadn't read the books first, you would get all the desired emotions that the whole production team wanted you to get. But because I wasn't surprised, I maybe didn't get that emotion. I basically spent the whole of season 1 hating him, despising him, but I don't think you would get that if you didn't know that he was going to be evil and cruel. So I think in terms of the shock factor coming from Joffrey's character and how he goes from being somebody who seems innocent to then being really cruel and evil, that I think would have been more impactful if you didn't know that it was coming up. Whereas I already knew that his innocence was a facade, it was fake. Fake has gone a fake, and that's exactly what he was doing. One interesting difference between the perspective of a book reader compared to a non-book reader is how episode 10 felt. So I reacted to episode 10 on my channel, and it was the season 1 finale, and I mentioned that I felt it was a bit slower because obviously you've just had Ned Stark's death, and episode 10 was mainly setting the scene for season 2, introducing new plots and locations, and there wasn't that much stuff happening. But I got a really insightful comment from one of you saying that when they watched episode 10, it didn't feel slow because all of that stuff and all of those events and conversations felt crazy to them because they didn't know it was coming up. So that episode to them felt really thrilling, and there was loads of stuff going on and real exciting. When I say slow, by the way, that's not a bad thing. It's still great. Like there were so many powerful scenes in that episode. But I just thought it was interesting that I felt like it was slow because I knew all of that stuff was coming up because I'd read the books first. But on the other hand, somebody who hadn't read the books first felt like the episode was really exciting and thrilling and eventful. Now, one thing that was an absolute blessing of reading the books first, and that I'm so happy I read the books first because of all these emotions, was leading up to Dany getting her dragons. If you are a frequent viewer of my channel, then firstly, thank you, but also you'll know I'm a dragon gal. I've got a thing about dragons. And one of the best scenes for me in A Song of Ice and Fire is when Dany gets her dragons. I just love everything about that chapter. And so when I could sense in episode 10 that we were leading up to the point where Dany was going to get her dragons, I was so excited and I just felt in awe. I was shaking, I was tense, I couldn't wait to see it. I wouldn't have felt any of those emotions if I didn't know that that was coming up. And the scene lived up to every single expectation that I had, and I set my standards high, and Game of Thrones delivered. Never settle for less, guys. Keep your expectations high, because in this TV show it paid off. That was such a pro to reading the books first because I was so excited for that scene. It's one of my favourite chapters in the book, and it's become my favourite scene of season 1 and maybe Game of Thrones altogether. I don't know, I've not watched the rest yet. I just loved it. It was great. What an ending to season 1. The best ending to a season ever. I can't speak, I need to calm down. So I'm really happy that I read the books because of that. As I mentioned earlier, there wasn't really too much that shocked me about season 1 because anything that was changed from the books was very minor. Season 1 of the TV show is as close to the book as you can possibly get. But like I said, I think that's going to change. So there may be things that shock me in future seasons that aren't in the books. So I might expect that something's going to happen and then it might not because the TV show has changed it. So that'll be interesting to see. It was very emotional putting faces to names. Through reading the books and investing myself in this universe that George R.R. Martin has created, I've grown connected to the characters already before the TV show. I've got my favourites, I've got my least favourites, I've got characters that I feel so strongly about. And again, I had really high expectations about the casting because I wanted my favourite characters to be done justice. I had these characters in my head and then seeing them in real life, well, on my TV screen, there's no emotion quite like it. When you have your favourite character and then they have the perfect actor to play them, that it actually feels like that character has come to life, I actually cannot put it into words how that feels. As I'm speaking, the one person going through my head is Tyrion Lannister. He is, I mean, he's got to be my favourite in the books. The amount of times that I go on about him, I always say he's one of my favourites. He might just be my favourite. And I mentioned this in a previous video of mine, but the actor that plays him, Peter Dinklage, is the most perfect casting for Tyrion ever so far in season 1. He is Tyrion. He was born to play Tyrion. Similarly, I think Arya is perfectly cast. She is another one of my absolute favourite characters. I care so much about Arya. And seeing the perfect casting for her and it being almost identical to who I pictured in my head when reading the books, there's just no feeling quite like it. I just thought it was brilliantly casted. Even Jon Snow, another one of my faves, his casting is pretty spot on, but I also don't really feel like Jon Snow would be that difficult to cast. I just had an attractive bloke in my head when reading about him, and that's exactly who he is in the show. There were some actors that were casted differently to how I pictured in my head, but I think were actually better in the TV show than who I thought. For example, Littlefinger, his actor is not who I pictured in my head when reading the books, But I think he's brilliant, and I actually think he's better in the TV show than what I pictured in my head when reading the books. The casting is brilliant for Cersei, Catelyn, obviously Ned Stark, Joffrey, Jaime. They're all casted so incredibly well. Now, I wasn't 100% certain on Daenerys or Shae at first. Those are my two characters that I'm a bit like, And again, I think that that is a con to reading the books, was that I had expectations of who I'd pictured in my head for these characters and in what I thought they were going to be like, and they are a bit different on screen to how they feel in the books. Like, I think Daenerys in the books is so different to Daenerys in the TV show. And same with Shae, like, even just like some of the mannerisms that are described in the books for them, they just don't come across quite the same way in the TV show. Not that that's a bad thing, by the way. And I'm sure that Shae will grow on me because there's so much more to see from her. Like, her storyline is not done yet. And I'm sure that this actress will grow on me. She just wasn't really what I thought Shae was going to be like. Whereas if you didn't have any expectations because you hadn't read the books, you probably would be indifferent to it, or you might like her a bit more. And same with Daenerys. And again, I wasn't 100% sure on the actress for her because I've seen Emilia Clarke in other things, very different things to Game of Thrones. I've seen her in like rom-coms. And so trying to visualize her as Daenerys, I'm struggling. But like I said, that scene of Daenerys and the dragons, TV gold, pure perfection. And I'm hoping that from this point forward, I will see her as my Daenerys. But I just think I struggled a little bit at first to see her as what I thought Daenerys was going to be. It's interesting watching the TV show because you obviously don't get the inner thoughts and feelings and the inner perspectives from the characters like you do in the books. Like, George R.R. Martin is so detailed in the way that he views the world as these characters. Like, each chapter is obviously written from a different point of view, and so you're seeing the world through their eyes. Whereas with the TV show, you don't get that difference between how the characters see the world as much. You don't get their inner monologues, and I love that about the books, is that you know what they're thinking, but you can't tell that from a TV show. So it's just interesting to see that difference. And I would highly recommend that if you enjoyed the TV show and you want to know more about their inner monologues and their thoughts and their feelings and how the characters see the world, I would so encourage you to read the books because George R.R. Martin does that so well. And I think it's really helpful for character depth, and you can see people's intentions a bit more. You can understand why they've done certain things or why they've acted a certain way because of those chapters. For example, Cersei's chapters are just crazy, and she's just psychologically broken all the time. And I think ultimately watching the TV show after reading the books is just a mixture of emotions. I had so many expectations, pretty much all of them were met, and when you set a standard so high and then it delivers, there's just no feeling like it. Now, I am worried, I am concerned that I'm not going to be this positive when we get to like season 7 and 8. I've heard many things, but at that point there isn't a book for me to compare the season to because the series is unfinished. I just think when you're so invested in a universe that has been created and you read the whole series, it's a long series, there's so much that goes on, there's so many locations, there's so much history behind the world. You learn about all these houses, all these characters, all these different things that go on, and then watching the TV show and seeing the characters how you imagine them, seeing the locations how you imagine them, and everything just feeling more real. It's just so emotional. And as well, like I mentioned, anticipating the bad stuff happening, the tension that I felt is like the most tension ever in my life. I have lived a very sheltered life, by the way. And I'm just so excited to watch season 2. I'm also excited to see how the TV show changes things from the books, because I know that not every season is going to be a perfect adaptation of the books. So I'm really interested to see what changes there are and what things might shock me. I also think as well, although I loved reading the books first, and I'm so happy that I've done that, I feel like if you haven't read the books or you decide to read them after the TV show, I feel like that could be just as emotional, but you're just doing it the other way around. Rather than feeling emotional during an episode like I was, you would probably feel emotional during a chapter because you've grown attached to the characters in the TV show and then you go into the books then hearing their inner monologues and hearing their thoughts and feelings and seeing the world through their eyes. So I feel like that must be really emotional for somebody who has watched the TV show first and has gained your connection to the characters that way, to then go into the books and learn more about them and get more depth from them. If you read the books after the TV show, please let me know how it felt for you. What was your perspective on that? Like, I would love to know, because obviously I'm never gonna know what that feels like because I read the books first. Just like you wouldn't know what I'm feeling like because you read the books after. Do you know what? Let's just chat about it. Let's have conversations in the comments, because I just think this is such an interesting topic. So if you've read the books first, I'd love for you to leave me a comment and let me know if you agree with some of my thoughts and feelings, or did you experience something different to me? And alternatively, if you read the books after, I would love to hear what your thoughts and feelings were. And if you haven't read the books at all, just let me know what you thought to Game of Thrones. That's all I'm going to say for now. Like I said, I will do an updated video after I've watched season 2, and my season 2 episode reactions will be coming onto my YouTube channel, so stick around for that if you'd be interested. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up to let me know that you did. And if you want to see these videos that I've got planned and you want to see more from me, then please subscribe, because it's free and it means that you can see my videos easier. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.